I was watching Dan Petty's water card presentations and felt inspired to create a tutorial to help product designers go from 0 to 1 in Blender and making a 3D scene remnant of this, inspired by this, of a credit card as a way to get your foot, like dip your toes in the water of like the 3D software. We're going to use Blender specifically, and really kind of add a little extra professionalism to your design presentations. So I think 3D is something that's super important. I think it's only going to continue getting more and more useful, and the software is going to get better and better. So I don't think there's ever been a better time to jump into it. So this is going to be a tutorial geared at product designers in going 0 to 1 and designing something to help pitch deck or whatever you want, or even a marketing website. So I'm going to quit Chrome so it doesn't kill my computer. I'm going to use this file from the Figma community by Ben Radcliffe. It looks like this. So I just took this portrait Visa card, I exported it 5x, and that's going to be the base of our card. So this is a Blender tutorial, so we're going to open up Blender for the first time. And Blender is a pretty complicated program, just in the same way that Photoshop is a pretty complicated program. So don't think you've bitten off more than you can chew or something like that. Anybody can learn this. It's really gotten easier and easier. So opening splash card, remnant of the Adobe products, we can ignore that. A thing I am using like an Apple mouse and an Apple keyboard just to kind of like handicap myself, and I think that's what most product designers are probably using. So ideally you'd have a 3-button mouse and maybe a bigger keyboard, but I'm going to just to show that you can make it work with whatever you've got. But because of that, we're going to go into our preferences and hit emulate numpad and emulate 3-button mouse underneath this input setting, and this will make things a little bit easier for us since we're using these peripherals. So one thing to notice immediately is like this big 3D scene, but even before that, I want to look up at these tabs at the top. So if you used Photoshop before, which I'm imagining most product designers probably have at some point, you're going to need to kind of customize it to whatever your workflow is. So the essentials, or the essentials for Blender look way different here. So what I'm going to do is like right-click these and delete these. I would recommend you do the same and kind of narrow down your list. These are the 3 that we're going to use right now, and we'll add in one extra one later on in the tutorial. So don't worry about those like getting lost or anything. This is a super modular program, so you can make it look however you want. So don't get too attached to one layout you're looking at. Anyways, so we have, I guess the biggest conceptual leap when you're working in 3D is navigating the 3D viewport. So the way we do that is with our mouse, and scrolling around will make us orbit our 3D cursor, which is this little guy in the middle here, underneath the cube. So the 3D cursor is independent of any shape, really, and it's just kind of to root you in 3D space, give you something to orbit around. So scrolling does that. Hold Command and scroll, and you'll zoom. Hold Shift and scroll, and you'll pan from side to side. And you can do all of these actions up here using these gizmos as well. Same thing, click into it, there's zoom, pan. This button will snap you to the camera view. So we have a camera in this default scene right here. You can see it over here, I'll select it. And if you hit this camera button, it'll snap you to that view. So that's going to be useful later on when we're finally like setting up our scene to render. So what we're going to do to begin with is select everything in the scene and get rid of it, so we can start with a fresh slate. And I'm going to do that by pressing A on my keyboard to select everything. And you'll see it's highlighted here in the collections. We have folders, Figma Take Notes, and we're going to hit X on our keyboard and delete everything. So a couple other keyboard shortcuts to keep in mind are 7 on your keyboard will snap you to a top-down view, and 3 will take you to a side view. So it's kind of hard to tell when there's nothing here. So I'm going to put something in there so we can tell. 7, this is a top view. And if we hit 3, this will take us to side view. And those are just good to kind of almost as like home bases to get you back where you were. I'm going to delete this and go through how you add things more slowly. So you can come up here and click Add, and then you have all these options here. The thing we're going to add is a plane, and this is because we're going to make a credit card. It's going to be very thin like this. And you can also add things by hitting Shift A, add a plane. There's 1,000 ways to do stuff in Blender. And you can also hit spacebar. This is super important. So take notes. You can hit spacebar. You get this really, this is a new feature in Blender. You get this really great search where you can search anything in Blender. So if we wanted to add a plane, we could do that. So we have like it shows you the shortcut here too, so you can like start remembering those. add a plane. So we've added our plane. I'm going to hit 7 to look at it from the top down, and I'm going to make it the shape of a card. So this is where, this is like very basic modeling in Blender. I'll show you how easy that can be to do. So I'm zooming in just a little bit and panning around just to kind of center this. So there's this idea of modes in Blender. So right now we're in object mode, and that's denoted up here in the top left, but there's also all these other modes. So the most important other mode we have is edit mode. So if we hit tab on our keyboard, that'll take us into edit mode. And now these little dots that appear on the sides here are actually the vertices that make up this piece, like this mesh, this piece of geometry. And so we can manipulate these however we want. So I'm pressing G on my keyboard to move all these around. So if you have them all selected using the A shortcut from earlier, you can press G and move stuff around. You can select just one and move it around. You could do a box selection by clicking and dragging and move both of these around. So this is how you do all kinds of 3D modeling. We're going to do some super simple stuff, but it'd be the same if you're doing something super complicated, like an apartment building. So all that being said, all we're going to do is select all of these vertices, which is the default as well, if you just left it like that. And we're going to hit S on our keyboard to scale. And if we just did that, it would scale up just how it is, totally proportionally locked. It's like holding shift in Figma or whatever. But we're wanting to lock it to an axis to elongate it and get that credit card shape. So we're going to hit S and then hit X. And now we're just scaling it along the X-axis and we're getting that credit card shape we're looking for. So I'm just going to eyeball it, make it kind of similar. And I'm going to tab back out of edit mode. So now we're in object mode. And now we have the beginnings of a credit card. Super simple, but this credit card is like infinitely thin right now. So we need to give it some depth by tabbing back into edit mode, selecting everything, hitting E on our keyboard for extrude, and we're going to make it a little bit thicker to give kind of the thickness of a credit card. So you can make it as big as you want, but credit card's pretty thin. So we're going to make it something like that. And there's other ways to do that too. You also have these buttons over here for these kind of shortcuts. But yeah, extrude is also a super common thing to do. So now we have the basic shape of our credit card. It's a little box, but our corners are super sharp. So what we're going to want to do is somehow take these corners and round them. So in 3D software, that's called a bevel. In 2D, like screen design software, it would be like rounded corners. So we're going to go into edit mode, and you saw me click around up here. I'm kind of jumping ahead of myself. So these options will change what you can select in edit mode. So we started with this vertex select, which means you can pick these individual points and grab them with G if you wanted to and do whatever you want. But there's also this one, which is for grabbing an entire edge, right? And then you have face select, which will let you grab like a collection of all of those and move a whole face. We need edges because we're wanting to take our corners and round them. So the way we're going to do that is select one of these, go to our next one by navigating the 3D viewport, selecting another edge, and then we're going to go over here and select the other edge, and we're going to select the final edge as well. Now, so we did that kind of the hard way, so I'm going to show you the easy way to do that too. This will introduce the idea of like view modes, which are up here, these little circles. So the one we're going to use to make it easier for us to select geometry like that, select edges, is this wire frame mode. So you can get to that by clicking this up here, and you get like kind of this ghost view where you just see the edges. And or if you were in, let's go back into edit mode. So if you were in here, you would see like selectors on the faces, or you would just see all the little dots, like one that you wouldn't normally be able to see if we were in this mode here. So you also saw me swap super fast. That's because Z on the keyboard brings up this shading menu, and you have solid, which is what we've been working in the whole time, wireframe, which is what's going to make it easier for us to select through objects, rendered mode, and material preview. So those both are going to be used later. But for now, let's go to wireframe mode. Let's select our object, go into edit mode. I'm going to press 3 on the keyboard, and that'll give me the side view that we talked about earlier. I'm going to select the edge select, so we can only select edges. I'm going to zoom in so you can see, and then I'm going to hit B on the keyboard, and that'll give me this tool, which I could use to select edges, and I'm going to drag it over these, and that just it selected all 4 edges. So if we did that in this mode, the solid mode, the only thing we would select, I think we still have one selected. The only thing we'd select is the front 2 edges that we're seeing. So if I went in the wireframe mode, you see these 2 aren't actually selected. So that's important distinction. Okay, deselecting everything and selecting those 4 corners. You can see I selected an additional one that I didn't mean to, so I'm going to shift click it to deselect it. And that's kind of a rundown on selecting things in edit mode. So we press 7 on the keyboard. This will take us to the top-down view. And even though you can't see they're selected, they're still selected. And I'm going to use another shortcut for beveling these edges. So I'm going to hit Control B, or Command B, because we're on a Mac. And I'm going to drag my keyboard, or my mouse. So you can see that we're getting the edges, they're beginning to be beveled, but there's only one bevel going on right now. So it looks super sharp. So using your scroll, you'll be able to add more. Whoops, I clicked and selected. Okay, just going back to where I was. And using the scroll wheel, you're able to put more and more detail in it. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and just drag your mouse around until you get kind of the shape you want. So I'm going to put in 5 and do it about there. That looks about right for a, going back to solid mode, for a credit card to me. So we've got our rounded corners now. We've got this totally blank thing. How do we get this to look like the artwork we have and something more presentable? So this is going to bring in the idea of UV editing, which is, and just like shading in general. So we're going to want to take our PNG that we have. Let me pull that up so we can remember. So my downloads, yeah, this PNG right here. So we're going to try to take this one and put it on the card in 3D. So how do we do that? So we're going to go to the shading tab for the first time here, and we're going to select our plane, which we can go ahead and rename this to our card. So once we have a card, and you can navigate around this the same way. The whole reason it's got this background is because we're in this material preview mode. So if we switch back, it will look like what we're used to. But material preview is going to let us see the changes that we're about to make. So we've got this. How do we give it a material, or like so a material is what will give it a color, or any of its like physical properties, and it's like how it interacts with light. So there's this materials property button here on the sidebar. So we're going to click into that and hit new. And this button would do the exact same thing as this button here. So I'm just kind of illustrating that there's 2 different places to do that. We hit new, and then we see both of these appear here. So we're going to be working from this. This is a node editor. And a node editor probably looks pretty crazy. Oops, I just hit spacebar and typed in a bunch of stuff. So you navigate around this the same way by holding command and scrolling to zoom and everything. But you'll see we have this material output, a principled BSDF. Like, what does any of this mean? It doesn't really matter to you right now. So the only thing that really matters is this base color. And if you click that and drag around, you can change the color of this. And now we're starting to get like to the fun stuff in Blender. I really like editing materials. But we're going to want to make it not just like a color or anything. We actually want its material to be an image. So that's where the idea of UV image editing and UV wrapping comes into play. So what we're going to want to do is add a node down here, just like how we did it. I guess we haven't added a node yet, but in the same way that we added a mesh out here, same idea for adding a node. So we hit Shift A, and then I'm going to search for the image texture node, and I'm going to drag this in. And what we're going to do is drag the color to the base color, so yellow to yellow right here. And now you see this goes totally black. That's because there's nothing there right now. So what we're going to do is open up our image that we downloaded, this portrait.png. And now, okay, we got something. Obviously that looks totally wrong, but we'll be able to fix it. So the way we're going to do that is by opening up a new workspace up here. Under General, it's the UV editing workspace. So we're going to open up that, and UV editing is pretty complicated. Honestly, I'm no expert on it, but I can show you how to at least get this to work with this object here. So what we're going to do is go into edit mode, and so in this right window, we're going into edit mode, selecting everything, pressing U on the keyboard, and doing this Smart UV Project option. So if we do that and just hit OK to the defaults, we'll see some stuff populate over here. Right? We're going to ignore a bunch of this, and we can also go into the material preview mode over here to kind of see what's happening. So we select everything, and you can see over here that you have these outlines that look like the top and the bottom of the card, and that's what they are. It's kind of like slices. So this debit Visa, that's like translating right here to this, and this file had a bit of a drop shadow on it, so you're getting some extra space down here. But what we're wanting to do is to take this part here and scale it up to the whole card and make it fit. So how do we do that? So we're going to do it by going to face select mode here and selecting our top face in this right window. So these kind of show the same thing selected. And then with that selected, we're going to come in here, select this whole thing, and start using the same ideas that we learned in the other section right here. So I'm going to press G to move it up a bit, right? And I'm going to kind of, let's see, where should I put it? Maybe right in the middle. And then hit S to scale it. And we're going to scale it till it starts getting close. I'm going to scale it till the edges line up on the left and the right. So the edges are kind of lined up now. Going to move it around just a little bit more to try to get close. And you can see it's like repeating and everything. This looks terrible still. So now what we're going to do is just select these top bits here, hit G, and I'm going to hit Y to lock it to the Y axis. I'm going to drag it down to the edge of this image here. Now we're getting closer. Try to line that up a little bit better. And we're going to do the same thing down here. And obviously you could do more precise measurements to try to get these things lined up better, but I just wanted to show like a real easy way to do this. So, okay, we've got that kind of lined up here in our UV editor. If we tab out, you can see we've actually got our artwork in Blender on this card. So that's pretty exciting stuff. That's a big step, a bit of a eureka moment maybe for someone. So that's super, super important, a big leap in this. So, but we see like the bottom looks terrible, right? So we have the top, but we're going to want to show the back of the card too. How can we do that? So the way we're going to do that is by assigning multiple materials to the same object. And we're going to go back to the shading tab to do that. So you can see we got our Visa card looking pretty good. Now what we're going to want to do is add a second material to this object. And we're going to, well, before we do that, let's go ahead and name the one that we have right here. So you can name the material here, or I think you could name it over here. We're just going to name it right here, and we're going to call it Visa Art. Right? You can name these whatever you want. But that's just to keep these in order because we're going to be adding an additional one. So let's do that by hitting this button up here on this right part. This is add a new material slot. We do that, and now we have a new blank material. We're going to add it to the material, and nothing happened. That's on purpose, though. What we're going to need to do now is go to wireframe mode, hit 3, and we're going to select everything that we want to be this other material. So we're going to go into select it, go into edit mode, deselect everything, and you can do that just by like clicking outside of it, and then we're going to hit B and select all these things underneath it. So we've got everything selected except for the top. And then what we're going to do is with this selected, this not our Visa art, but this, and also these things selected, we're going to hit assign, and now this will have the white material instead of the Visa material, which wasn't UV unwrapped and is looking crazy. So to kind of display that it's working, we'll put in a color, and now you'll see the bottom is that color, but the top is a different color. Okay, pat yourself on the back. That's another good one. Let's do card back. These names are terrible, but at least we're consistent with Figma. So yeah, that's looking good. What else can we do to improve the look of our card? Maybe we'll change the color a little bit. And honestly, now that we have the card here, we can pretty much jump straight into like rendering it and doing the exciting stuff and getting everything ready to go. So our card's in here. It's looking good. I'm going to save this file in case it crashes or something. Untitled 1. That is one thing that Figma's been helpful with. I don't have any more of those on my computer anymore. So not to only throw out shade. Okay, so we've got our card. Now what we're going to do is go into the Layout tab, and we're going to kind of block out our scene and add in what our final render is kind of going to look like. So to do that, let's add in a plane and scale it up pretty big and call this our floor, and this will be the bottom of our scene. Let's bring this up. I'm selecting the card. I'm going to press G and Z to bring it up a little bit. One more thing we can do to our card to try to improve its look a little bit is actually come back into edit mode, and let's select both the top edges and the bottom edges. Oops, I'm scaling. And let's bevel these as well. So this will kind of round off these edges. So with those selected, we're going to hit Command B, and look at that. Get some rounded edges. Probably don't need a whole lot of detail there, so something like this. And now let's make sure that still looks okay. Yeah, okay, so that looks better now. We've got slightly rounded edges. I don't know if you can really tell, but it'll look better in our final render. And let's see what happens if we right-click this and hit Shade Smooth. So you see we did that, and a lot. So I can go back to Shade Flat, and you can see it helps kind of automatically make our thing look like a lot higher poly than it actually is. So with those changes, it's starting to look like a pretty solid card. Okay, so we've got our card and we've got our floor. Let's pick a color for our floor so everything doesn't look exactly the same. And let's do that by coming into the Material tab, hitting New, and adding in maybe like a light pink color, something like that. So this is an example of how the sidebar could actually be useful. If you're not in the Shading tab with that node editor, you'll be able to just come in here and edit it kind of on the fly. So let's do that, and let's add in a cube. So our cube is right in the middle of this, which isn't exactly what we want. Let's see, let's move it back a little bit. Let's scale it up a little bit, not that much, geez. And let's make it taller. And let's make it wider too. So it's kind of hiding our card, but we don't have to worry about that too much because we can move everything around. So I'm just scaling this all around using those shortcuts. I'm going to hit G and X to move it back a little bit more. And this is where your kind of the idea of composition is going to come into play. So it's more of an art really, and you'll have to play around with it a bit till you get something you're happy with. But the idea I'm going for right now is to get this card and kind of lean it up against this like wall. So let's select the card now, and a new shortcut is R, and that's going to let us rotate. But you see we're rotating all over the place. There's like no control over it, but same idea, hit X, and you're locked to the X, hit Z, you're locked to the Z, and hit Y, and you're locked to the Y. And we want the Y rotation. So I'm going to hit 3 on my keyboard, and where am I going to hit 3 on my keyboard? No, I don't think that's going to help us here. Let's just rotate this on the Y and kind of like eyeball it. Then we'll hit G and Z to move it up, and now we'll hit 3 or 1 on the keyboard is a shortcut to get to this kind of view that I wanted. And let's move it so it looks like it's like resting on the on this wall here. So if we hit G and X, move it back to that corner, looks like it's touching. We can select our floor here from the scene collection to get an idea of where it is, and you can see right now it's cutting through the bottom. So let's bring this up a little bit so it's not doing that. And now if we look at it, it looks like our card is resting nice and gently up against this wall. So the next thing we'll want to do is probably give a material to our wall so it doesn't look quite so drab. We'll make it, what color should we make the wall? Maybe like a teal. I think that's a good look. And now we're starting to get something that looks like a scene. So let's add in another instance of this card flipped around to show off the back of it. So I'm going to do that by selecting the card and then hitting Shift-D to duplicate it. And I'm going to lock it to the Y axis by hitting Y. And I'm going to move it right next to it. And you'll see we have another card over here. It's automatically named. And let's rotate this card around till it's going the way we want it to go. Also, another way that might help with editing rotations and stuff like this is hitting N on your keyboard to bring up this menu. And this will show you all the properties of this item here. So our rotation, for instance, if we're running to rotate the Z, I guess we'll want to do it 180 degrees. So you could type that in here, or you can, while you're doing one of these, you could just hit R on the keyboard and type in 180. No, I hit 160. R 180, and then, or are we just doing 90 degrees? I'm getting all lost here. Oh, no, I know what the problem was. I wasn't hitting Z. So R, Z, and then 180. It's like we're almost programming at this point. So yeah, lots of shortcuts in Blender. But now we're rotated. Let's do that same thing we did last time and rotate the, what is this? The Y-axis till it looks like it's about right. Or Y. And these don't have to be the same if you don't want them to be. Like, this is where you can get kind of artistic with it, I suppose. But obviously that's cutting into the wall, which is not ideal. So we're going to move it so it's not doing that. And there we go. So these will be a little bit offset. Okay, so now we have the basics of what our scene is going to look like, but we need to set up a camera to actually be able to render this at all, because we don't have a camera in the scene right now. So the way we're going to do that is hit Shift A, and we're going to add in a camera. Where is it? There we go. So you can't see where the camera is, but if we went into wireframe mode, you can see it's hidden over here. We're not even going to worry about that right now. So you could move it manually if you wanted to, right? But what we're going to do is kind of line up in our viewport where we want the camera to be, and then what I hinted at earlier, go into the spacebar menu and type in camera, and let's do this align active camera to view. So it's got a shortcut to it, but I can never remember it. But that's the function we're wanting here. So now that outline is what our camera would render. And I just moved my mouse on accident, so I'm going to hit this camera button to toggle us back into the view. And another useful thing is to hit this view tab here. So if you don't have this menu, it's N on your keyboard, or I think this little arrow does it too, maybe? Yeah, okay. So N, or that tiny, tiny arrow. Hit view and do this checkbox, and now the camera will follow your view automatically. So this is pretty useful as well. We're going to zoom in on it, maybe something like this. You can go into the material preview to get a better idea as well. Let's try to get a little more depth of the cards in the shot here. So let's do something kind of like this, make it a little more dynamic. And then I'm going to uncheck this so I'm not moving the camera around everywhere. And then I'm going to go back into the camera view. We're not moving the camera though, but we've got all this empty space on the sides. So I'm just going to scale everything up a bit to, oops, that's the wrong axis, to kind of fill up that space. So now we have what our scene should look like, all blocked out. But if we rendered this right now, it'd probably look pretty crazy. So we're going to go to the rendering step, and in order to do that, you're going to hit this render, or the scene tab. What is this called? The render properties tab. So right now our render engine is Eevee, which is like a real-time render. It's super fast, good for video games, stuff like that. Or people do pretty crazy stuff with it. But we're going to use cycles because it gives you a more photorealistic render. So you're going to hit cycles, and then a couple more options will be in here, your CPU or GPU. I'm going to use the GPU. I think that's usually better, but it'll depend on what hardware you're on. So now that we're in cycles, we can go to this rendered view, and you'll see something much more realistic looking, but it's incredibly dark. And that's because we don't have a light in our scene right now. So in order to add a light to our scene, we're going to go into our shading tab. Actually, I think there's a better way to do this now. Let's see. Let's keep this on. We're going to go to our World Properties tab, and can I do this here? Okay. No, I don't think I'm going to be able to do the way I thought I was. But okay, so let's go back to the shading tab, go to the World tab, and we're going to, so that was pretty quick. So shading tab, which we've been to before. I just switched it to solid view because my computer's heating up and I don't want it to explode or something like that. And then you could toggle between object and world. We're going to go to world because we're going to set the lighting for the whole world here. So same thing, as adding nodes to the other section. But we're gonna look for the sky texture, which is new in Blender and super, super powerful. So again, connect color to color. And now if we go to this world tab, we can see the sky textures here. And we can expand it and get the same settings here as well as here. So I'm gonna go ahead and leave this tab and go back to this one. And you can see our light, the sun is working. So, but it's way too bright. So you have all of these settings here. And I think this shader is great because it goes to like the physical world for metaphors here. All of these are like true to life. You can change the rotation of the sun to get these shadows to look however you want. The sun's obviously a little too powerful here, so I'm going to bring that down to half on the strength, or maybe even lower to like a 0.1. And this is where, again, a lot of like the freedom will come into play. So you'll just have to make something that looks good, but I trust if you're a designer, you've probably got pretty decent taste. But also, who does? I don't know you. So let's see. We've got that. We can change all of these settings. If we make the sun bigger, our shadows will become more diffuse. And if we make the sun smaller, our shadows will become way sharper. So it's totally up to you. I personally like a softer shadow look. So I'm going to crank that up to 50, and I'm going to crank the light to 0.3. And these settings will, I mean, I can't hammer home how much your personal taste is important here, but I hope you get it. All right, so let's do 0.35 for the brightness. And we could render this right now and get a pretty good result, but there's one more thing I want to change. And this is kind of a fun trick. So we're going to go to the shading tab, go into our object. We're going to go to the card back, and you can go into the rendered view here to get a better idea of what this preview is going to look like. And what we're going to do is use a color ramp to get a gradient effect. So color ramp node, color to color, should be getting used to that. And then we're going to edit these colors to be whatever we want. Let's do that same kind of purple that we had. And right now it's going purple to white. Let me zoom out so you can see what that's looking like. So it looks kind of like the floor right now, so maybe we'll darken it up a bit. And we'll change this white handle to another purple, maybe a teal to kind of go with the theme of the whole render. Let's see. Let's select this one. Let's make these colors a little darker so they're popping out a little bit more. And you can also change other parts of the material. So if we made it metallic, it would start looking metal, almost like it's illuminating. So now it's like almost mirrored. So this is a pretty cool effect. I don't think it's exactly what a real card would look like. I'm seeing my webcam slow down because I'm like really pushing the computer with all this rendering. So anyways, we've got that set up. Our camera looks like this. If we go to the render tab, our scene looks like this. What we're going to do now is go ahead. We could go ahead and render our scene, but again, I'm going to keep getting close and close. But there's one more thing that I think is super important, and it's this idea of depth of field. So if we go into the camera settings with the camera selected, there's this camera tab. You hit depth of field and use this eyedropper tool. And if we select this object card, our depth of field is looking at this card. And I'm sure there's some photographers who are also designers, so this stuff should make sense. But we could also break the laws of physics here if we wanted to and make these numbers do whatever we want. So I'm going to make the f-stop just like super low. I'm no photographer, so I don't know if that's actually physically possible or if it's just would be very expensive. So if you do something like this, you'll be able to like fade out the background, which is a really good look at a lot of things. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense in this scene we're doing right now. And it's going to be super over dramatic, but I think it's an important feature you should notice there. Depth of field and the little eyedropper. So with all of that done, all of this legwork, we finally get to render it and see what it looks like. So the way you do that is come into this render tab and hit render image. Now, what this is going to do is make your computer take off like a little jet plane, but very slowly but surely you'll be able to see your render take place. And this is a very rewarding part of working in 3D, is being able to like see this render happening. Everything's looking great, and you get to just like wait. Your computer's on fire, so go get a cup of coffee or something. You've earned it. And even though the things in this renderer aren't actual geometry, like this is just a PNG, right? But it goes a long way to making it look real. Like, sure, we could go in there and like model all of this stuff by hand and give it like a physically accurate reflective metal material. But for the majority of stuff, you don't need that much, you know? You just need like a UV map on a rectangle, and that'll get you like 99% of the way there. So you can see how this is rendering. It looks great. We don't have to sit through the entire render, but something you should know is that, because this was confusing to me when I started, I'd get my render and then not know how to save it. So you hit image, and then you'll be able, after it's finished, you'll be able to do the save as, and then you just save it as an image on your computer, wherever. But yeah, that's kind of the rundown on how a product designer can use Blender in a pretty simple way, right? We didn't set up any crazy lights or anything like that. Our background is a couple cubes, and our card is just a rectangle with some rounded edges. But you get stuff that's super nice like this. So I think more and more, and we've been seeing this, more and more designers are using 3D software. And I think if it's something you don't already have in your tool belt, at least like a surface level understanding will take you a long, long way. So anyways, that's everything I wanted to go over. One more thing I can mention is under here in these rendered settings, the output settings here, this tab, you can change the resolution of the output. So if you want to do like a nice 4K image of it, it'll take a while, but you can do that here. So yeah, I hope somebody was able to learn something like that, and that I didn't skip over any giant step that's preventing anyone from finishing. But if I am, just drop a comment and I'll try to respond to it as fast as I can. But yeah, thanks for watching, and I hope you guys are able to make some pretty cool stuff in Blender now. All right, thanks.